Well, it was a long, drawn-out night of vote counting, but unofficial results from Elections Canada coming out early this morning indicate there's been a pretty big upset in the riding of Toronto-St. Paul's. Now, with 100% of polls reporting, Conservative Don Stewart appears to have won the seat by a margin of almost 600 votes. He was trailing in the polls for most of the night to Liberal Leslie Church, but Stewart's lead emerged as the last few polls reported. Tabulating these votes was definitely a long process due to the huge number of candidates on the ballot. Let's talk live now with CTV's host of Power Play and Question Period, Vashi Kapellas. Vashi, put this in perspective. How significant is this result in Toronto-St. Paul's?
There is no way, Nick, to overstate how significant politically this outcome is. You alluded to it. This is probably one of the top 5 safest seats in the entire country for the Liberals. Traditionally, that was how it viewed. Back in 2011, when Michael Ignatieff was leading the Liberals and they were decimated across the country, reduced to just 34 seats. One of them was this seat. The former minister who held it, Carolyn Bennett, won 9 successive elections. This is huge. I can tell you the war rooms for both the Conservatives and the Liberals are in shock this morning. They thought it would be a narrow win for the Liberals. They thought that perhaps the margin from the last election, which was a 24-point win, would be reduced to somewhere in and around 10 points. Later in the night, when it started to look like it was 5 points, they were already getting pretty surprised. The win close to 4 a.m. this morning, shockwaves. No other way to describe it.
Yeah, I arrived to work and was still waiting for the result, thinking I've got to know by now, but it really took till then, Vashi. Indeed. So let's move from the war rooms to the PMO. If you're Katie and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and you're taking a look at these, how do they interpret the tea leaves here?
I mean, there's no other way to interpret them, I think it's fair to say today, other than, an indictment of the Prime Minister at this moment in time. They have put all of their cards on the table, in particular over the last 2 months, to aim to address what is really a cost of living crisis in the country, and one that centers around the issue of housing affordability. They outlined a budget in a very different way, releasing it in stages over a period of weeks rather than all in one day. They had hoped to see by the end of this month a gain of 5 points in the polls nationally. Instead, they are nationally exactly where they were a number of months ago, 15 to 20 points behind the Conservatives. But the fact it could translate to a downtown Toronto riding simply means there is no seat that is safe for them going forward. You have to imagine there are some tough conversations to be had about the Prime Minister remaining on as Liberal leader. Yeah,
I mean, the budget really didn't shift anything. And like you mentioned, Toronto has been such a fortress, of red for the Liberals for so long. So, it kind of, draws the next question here because, Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, has been, campaigning recently using really powerful, almost apocalyptic rhetoric about what would happen to the country if Pierre Poilievre becomes Prime Minister, which a lot of polls, as you've indicated, suggest that will happen. That doesn't seem to be resonating with voters.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is yesterday she made an additional comment that I know Conservatives are seizing on today. She called the alternative to the candidate she was supporting, the Liberal candidate in Toronto, St. Paul's, cold, cruel, and small. Today, Conservatives are saying that, that's like a deplorables comment from Hillary Clinton back in 2016. Is this the way that they continue to characterize people who support the opposition at this moment in time when those people are greater in number than those who support the Liberals? I mean, those are some big questions to keep our eye on moving forward. I'm very interested to see what the communications are today from the government. The Prime Minister has an event, so does Minister Freeland. Are they going to accept this result with humility, or will they keep kind of calling the alternative and people who support the Conservatives cold, cruel, and small? Yeah. Very good. It's going to be really interesting to see the way that
Vashi,
goes
when
down.
do you think that we'll actually see the impact of this result of Don Stewart winning in Toronto St. Paul's? And I'm talking, possibly a resignation or other Liberals coming forward and saying, you know what, it's time for Justin Trudeau to go. I'm seeing a lot of people calling for it on X this morning. But when do you think that ultimately the ripple effect of this will actually play out?
So a couple of things will inform the answer to that. I think it depends what kind of conversation, like we just talked about, is had in the Prime Minister's office, because they have been, until now, very dead set on making sure he is the candidate for the Liberal Party in the next election. But the conversation I'm really watching is the one that's being had in caucus. This is Justin Trudeau's party. There's no public mutiny that has been had so far, but I have to tell you, I have had a number of members of caucus, particularly in the Greater Toronto area, messaging me today, one of whom even said, it's time time this week for the prime minister to take a walk. Like, they are getting more vocal about their displeasure. They describe being stunned today, but not surprised. What happens in the caucus backrooms? Do they put the pressure on the prime minister to resign for the good of the party? They have not done that so far, which is a very unique situation in Canadian party politics. I imagine if this were the Conservatives, that leader would already be out, right? And so that's going to be the conversation that I'm paying attention to as far as where this goes from here, even more so perhaps than the one that takes place in the Prime Minister's office.
Okay, so many conversations. You'll be having them on your radio show, the Vashti Capello's radio show, plus on Power Play this evening on CTV News Channel. Vashti Capello, as always, appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime, Nick.
Okay, take care.